There we go.
There we are. So glad to be here. My lovely husband and I are presenting for the very first time ever on stage together. So
Yeah.
Watch the sparks fly, baby.
We'll see how this goes. We have a lot of stories to tell, and sometimes hands shoot up and people say, wait, that wasn't real. Is that fake? What's going on? So we're going to try to get through everything I wanted to talk about, and she's definitely going to tell you things that she should talk about and you should listen. You know who I am, or you don't. Either way, I'm a guy who breaks into things. Not like you all do, not with the keyboards and the ones and the zeros mostly. I am a physical entry specialist. I'm a safe technician, I'm a lock technician, a forensic locksmith, and a covert entry team operator. So I break into buildings. I break into critical infrastructure. I've been featured doing trainings and videos about this. I don't know if anyone has ever seen my silly personality online where I'm breaking into buildings and this is called an underdoor tool. They were filming, and the camera guy was like, why is he kneeling? Wait, how did the door, what? And he said, can you do that again, but like way slower? I don't even know if that translates to film. So yes, neutralizing safes on a lot of army bases, or maybe I'm actually in your server room, or I was yesterday or will be tomorrow. That's kind of my scene. And you know a lot about offensive security, but you also try to help out the blue team in different ways.
I am. I'm the boring half of this couple. So I get to have my own kind of fun, though. So once I told a Senate investigative committee that I'm an offensive information security researcher, which is how you pronounce hacker in front of somebody who can arrest you. And I run a company called Red Queen Dynamics. We do SaaS compliance because I'm angry and I want to communicate that. And I'd rather get a stage and talk about being mad about things for a minute. So I also do some stuff in foreign policy, which matters because we've got people who are being targeted every single day in this country by foreign actors. And unfortunately, it's some of you right now. So I also am a poker player, and that's a lot of fun. I grew up in my stepdad's MSP. That's quite a tale as well, too. I ended up dropping out of high school a lot.
The a lot makes that art.
Yeah. Like I succeeded at fucking up so much. Am I allowed to swear here? Sweet. Okay, great. I'm glad to hear that because this is fully a trick. Just letting you guys know right now. So yeah, I'm a poker player. I ended up mixing my love of doing things in an iterated fashion with offensive security. So here I am doing, I think it's like a Sans CTF. I love games. And my dad and I, my pop and I go play the World Series of Poker every year. It is an absolute blast. Hey, if you've got a chance to spend time with your dad having a great time, please do it while you can, right? So we try to do that every single year. I am profoundly fortunate to also have another dad. This is my dad, Marv Dad. Came into my life when I was 14 or 15. Remember how I said I dropped out of high school a lot? Well, he hired me at his MSP, and this is the first day of me not being a student anymore and working for him. That's his disappointed face. I ended up putting computers together for him. I built a whole bunch of machines, a bunch of jumpers and IDE cables. Like this was my day every day when I screwed up school a lot. So I learned to not do that as much anymore. And then I started spending time talking to people about security. I have spent some time telling legislators and policymakers about the world that we're all in right now. And a couple weeks ago, I was doing this at RSA. And if there is
that was
a world,
dope panel.
If there's a world more different than that, than here, I don't know what it is, but I do like my context switching, and I love checklists. I love them, and that's one of the reasons I became a pilot. I think they're amazing. I think they're cool, and I think they save us from making errors and mistakes. And there's a bunch of shit on checklists that can save people's lives in a true and meaningful way. I genuinely believe that.
So both of us in our own ways, our lives revolve around the security industry and the security world. And it helps to keep things fun by seeing it as a challenge, as a hacker would see the world. So Tarah and I, this is photos of us on our honeymoon. This is photos of us at our wedding.
It's not every photo.
Our hands are rather unique hands. If some of you who know us pretty well, our hands don't just have our wedding rings. They actually have our embedded credentials in them. So we have chips in each hand that we've literally, you can look online, watch the big horse needle going in with the injection, but then rewriting those credentials to various occasions when you want to open a locked door. Tarah had rewritten her work badge a few different times and got the PhysSec team very befuddled as to how she was getting in places. I tend to just do boring things like lose my hotel key. So instead of that, I'll just put my hotel room key on my hand. So you can never get too tipsy downstairs at the after party. You can always just come on upstairs and pop that right open. People ask us all the time, like, oh man, you must see a lot of wildly bad security posture out there. And it's true, we do. A lot of security is kind of just, you might say, symbolic. This is a very popular lock used in a lot of government buildings. It's used in this particular infrastructure here, just not to particularly great effect. Or you get the classic, it's undermined by people, right? Here you have the server room door. Server room's getting a little hot. Let's just prop it open. The machine room to this elevator system getting a little hot. Let's prop it open with a fan. You often ask me, you say, do you talk to people? You always say, do you see the passwords, right?
Yeah. Like, how many of the people in this room right here have ever seen a real live, honest to God, in the wild password written down on a Post-it note? Oh my.
Yeah. That's for those watching at home.
Every day.
That's every hand in the room
just went up. Exactly. Yeah. So why does this happen? Why do people write passwords down? Why do you see this in the wild?
Right. Passwords or just codes. Like people ask me, do you see them too? And I was like, well, I usually just see Sharpie on systems because they don't even change the code. It's just set once and there forever. Why don't people follow security practices the way they should?
Why Post-it notes? But why Sharpie marker and why these common defaults? Why don't people follow these best practices?
It all really comes down to whether for the individual, they can emotionally attach themselves to the context and whether they can visualize the risk. So if you ask somebody, hey, would you ever leave your laptop bag on the seat of your car? And a lot of my clients are tech firms, right? They live in the Bay Area. They're like, oh God, I wouldn't leave an empty coffee cup on the seat of my car. Someone's going to smash it and try to steal it for something. And I would ask those same executives, okay, but that's rough. Do you have on-street parking? And they say, no, I have off-street parking. I can go home and I've got a garage. And I say, all right, but if you're in the garage and you close the car up, do you ever leave your laptop bag in the car then? And they say, well, yeah, it's the garage. I say, but isn't there a rule, a best practice? You shouldn't leave your laptop unattended. And it kind of takes them a minute until I say, do you understand that inside your garage, there's just a simple red handle? If there's an earthquake, a disaster, you got to get out. That's what that's for. It's the disconnect. There are tools in my industry that let you exploit this. There's a tool, it's just called the ripcord, where you're reaching right inside the seam of the garage. That red handle is right there at the front of the building when the door is rolled down. You can hit that disconnect. And in fact, we've done actual assessments of executive homes. It's not our main gig. Usually we're in big corporate buildings, but we've done some high-profile people's residences. And I showed them, I said, look, if I use this ripcord and I pop your garage door, oh, look, is that your car? Is that you're not going to look in your back seat. Is your laptop maybe in there? And that's really what sold it for the person. It really comes down to the fact that people will follow a rule if they can understand and visualize the risk. And if they can't really understand that risk, or if that risk feels distant, there's no impetus to comply with the security best practices. And a lot of the rules that we lay down for people can't emotionally attach to.
They can't attach to it because they genuinely don't understand why the jargon from compliance regulations affects their lives. It's about as relevant to them as the terms of service you just click through to install the Hoova app for this thing, right? So that's the problem. That's the challenge that we see, right? Now, here's the thing. If you're going to make an emotional connection to boilerplate from compliance, you better have an emotional attachment. So I have brought narrative in human form with me in show and tell. And I would love to know if you can tell us, are there any stories from your time in the field that can help us to illustrate what we're talking about when it comes to making this shit real for people?
Yes. If you want to make the risk seem real, let's talk about actually breaking in and stealing stuff. So that's most of the stories I'm going to tell. How about the first one here? We had a client that said, can you steal a laptop from our building? This was a call center. They were processing payment information. They say, look, all of our laptops are out on the desks. And our whole thing is we have going. It should only really be employees and vendors, but we have these asset tags, right? And our security process on the way in and the way out, we screen everybody. And if any tech device has an asset tag, you shouldn't be able to remove it from the building. We've really tried to train our staff and our guards, but we don't know exactly how effective that would be. Could you try to steal a laptop? And I said, yeah, I'll do my best. What I didn't tell them was that I wasn't just going to try. If you're going to go big, go big. So I went on eBay and I bought a polo shirt from CDW. I went to Sticker Giant and I made a roll of stickers that just said, system replacement, spring 2018. And I walked around their building and I was just sort of picking up laptops if somebody wasn't at their desk. And I would just put a sticker on it and put a sticker on this, put a sticker on this. And I tactically acquired a hand truck somewhere. And then I went around again and I just started taking laptops off of desks and I was stacking them up on this hand truck. One employee came by. He's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh," and I picked up a laptop. I say, "See, does your laptop have one of these replacement stickers? Is your laptop running slowly?" He's like, "Oh, I hate my laptop, the game." I was like, "You might be on the replacement program. Go check it out and leave me alone, buddy." So he ran off. And in the end, I walked up to the exit entry point. I said, "Okay, hey, buddy, can you hold that door?" And the guard was like, "Oh, man, yeah, what do you got there?" I was like, "Oh, they have this replacement program, going to get new laptops for people." I stole 27 laptops. So yes, I could steal a laptop, but if you really sell it, what did I do? I bought a shirt and stickers, and I even stole the hand truck too. There you go.
He did, and I'm so in love.
I love you very much.
Oh my God. This is a good marriage, people. So here's the thing, right? When we look at a situation like this and say, you've heard this story told, and a fun story by a professional thief. How would you like to hear this story told by a corporate executive? That is the version of this that we often have to tell our customers and our clients, right? See this right here? These are the compliance frameworks and the points in each one of those compliance frameworks that apply to every single one of the actions that Deviant took when he walked out of a company stealing 27 laptops. And these are the ones we're expecting people to understand, implement, and control in their every single day lives. Now, I don't really see these regulations anymore, right? I just see the impact of them, right? Those regulations and him walking out, I mean, they're the same thing, right? I don't even see the compliance frameworks anymore. I just see a hand truck and a song as he merrily goes on his way, right? So what we have got to start doing is asking people questions that connect to their lives, that connect to something that makes this real for them, okay? We need to ask people a question like, what happens when somebody tries to get into your company, when they visit your organizational offices? And what we want to hear is that visitors have to be signed in and escorted, both in, and I can't emphasize this enough, and out of the organization that they are being signed into, right? When somebody contacts you about tech support, do you check and make sure they are who they say they are? Are you empowered to stop them at that door if you don't know them, don't believe them, or aren't sure they're allowed to be let in that day? Here's the thing. We're waiting for somebody to be empowered, and we're looking for somebody to be empowered to say, just to let me call somebody who will know for sure. That's all we want people to know how to do. And that's the translation of these compliance frameworks that matter because it's good security posture that breaks intrusion pathways, right?
This is why she is actually the better speaker than I, because she can break down things into plain English language, that giant page of standards that makes me go, oh God. And I just walk away from it, as do many employees in many companies. She can translate into very simple English questions. And I love that. I got another story. I'm calling this one the blast from the past, right? So this was a large tech firm. A lot of our clients are IT companies, data centers, et cetera. And this large tech firm, there was a way we could get in the building. We could get some access because they had visitor credentials. They had a little system where you could punch in and say you were here from this or that vendor, and it would spit out a badge. And you could get to the meeting rooms. You could get to the break room. Those credentials were very limited, though. They didn't actually open many of the doors. I was impressed, and they thought they were impressive. They said, well, we have electronic badges even for the conference room. We don't want people just wandering in off the street and getting our free snacks and sun chips. I said, okay, but I thought to myself, all right, you've got an electronic badge here, and you've given me the credentials that open some things. How unified your electronic badge system is. Many people at companies, they wear their badge. They have a visible badge policy. Sometimes we'll take really long-range reconnaissance photos of people wearing their badges so we can mock up a fake, badge. I didn't have a badge printer with me right now, and we didn't have to do that in this instance. Remember, we had guest badges. They were just limited. And if I'm looking at people's company badges on site, a lot of times I don't even care about the front as much as the back. I don't know if anyone here has their work badge. If you feel like it, you could pull it out and look. Do you have little numbers like stamped on your badge, maybe on the rear side? That's the actual credential number. That's the card number of your badge in many instances. And if you know how to program or reprogram badges, you can turn something like, let's say, a guest badge into somebody else's badge. And at the time, I was looking at employees kind of walking by me in the guest areas in the break room, and I'm saying, okay, that's 10,000. We got 15. I'm talking to Bobik. I'm like, what numbers are you seeing? He's like, I'm seeing all like 10,000. So I was like, well, okay, let's try to rewrite our vendor badge with a much lower number. Because if a company has had the same badge system forever, because nobody upgrades their system, it's a huge lift, maybe the older badges that they issued, if they issued them sequentially, which many of them do, maybe older badges would be very important people, maybe the founder or something of the company. And we tried to lower the number. We tried arbitrary numbers, and some would not boop, and some would, oh, wait a minute, this one, boop. We got to, oh, cool. Hey, I just tried this one. Try this one. You write your badge to that. You go down that side. I'm going to go on this side. We're messaging. I'm like, dude, my badge is working everywhere. He's like, man, my badge is working everywhere. And someone else on the team is like, dude, I'm in the data center. This badge works everywhere. I said, wow, maybe we actually did find like the original founding member's badge. Almost. During the debrief, here's what we discovered. The badge that we were using belonged to a family relative of the company founder who was a dab hand at interior design and feng shui. They had been given full access to the site before the company ever even moved in. And they were doing interior design and swatches of colors and samples of furniture. And yes, when they finished that, they handed their badge back to somebody and it was put in a drawer or destroyed, who knows, but it was never unenrolled from the system. Being able to rewrite your badge is known. It's a known attack. Students at University of Montana did this to their president, like Royce Engstrom. He's in pictures with his Grizz card, and a student named Zach literally changed his Grizz card to be President Engstrom's Grizz card. And it was a very fun thing, and he got written up with a school paper. So this is known. When someone leaves, you think of it like, hey, turn in your key card, turn in your badge. Like we have this visual of the people getting their pink slip. And like, that's, yeah, you have to give your physical stuff back, but that's not nearly as important as deactivating it in the badge management system, which some places, if you can believe it, don't do.
And the reason they do that is because it's just not right there in front of them as something that should be on a checklist for them to go through. And I say the word checklist a lot. People hate the word checklist. I love it so much. And at the same time, we've got to start asking ourselves questions about why these processes aren't getting followed. So you heard his story. You heard the story from an access control system hacker. And he does classes on this. He's busy training like the government of like all over the place, you know. And
Blue forces only.
He's busy doing this and like teaching people how to break into buildings and stuff like that. I'm sitting over there like reading the manuals about stuff. So, you know, as somebody who does this stuff on a keyboard as opposed to in buildings, I sit there and I think about this and I go, that's an enumeration attack, right? And if we had paid attention to the number of controls that would have prevented this attack, and let's just move to screen number 2 of the controls that would have prevented this attack, any one of which would have broken the chain of this building, right? Any one of these things that had been paid attention to would have been enough to stop this attack from occurring, or certainly enough to make you have a really bad day.
But they're not plain language.
Right.
No one translates it except maybe.
Yeah. Through disabling accounts and right, exactly. So what do you have to ask people? What should you in this room ask people? The question is, how do you physically access your organization's workspace? All right. The answer is probably something like, I've got an electronic badge. It opens doors, right? And here is an incredible question to ask. Has anybody who doesn't work here anymore ever shown up again? Do you know how they got in? Are credentials still active for old employees? Ask this question. It's the kind of question which, phrased right, not appear on any compliance framework, all right? I've never seen anyone on a compliance framework read off a question that says, hey, when somebody gets fired and they got to come back and pick up their stuff, did somebody have to let them in the building to do it? Were they escorted? Right? That question right there would save you 95% of what's going on. So this right here, we disable accounts as well as repossess their physical access for getting back in the building. That stops it right there. How do you authenticate credentials? All right. Is it just the door? Are you checking it? Right? And this right here, ensuring that you have a properly audited and secure physical access control system with protected storage so that somebody like Bobak and Deviant can't just dump credentials and merrily have a field day through your entire building is the way that you check to make sure that you're keeping your company safe. If they'd used secure badges, you couldn't have cloned them. There's badges he can't clone. There's like 3 of them or something. I don't know. The rest of them, I mean, it's pretty righteous. If you pay attention to DEF CON this year, I have the feeling that you're going to see some pretty cool shit. The
DEF CON and Black Hat talk that Bobak submitted, whole crap.
Okay. If they'd removed old badges, not just taken them physically away from people, but deauthorized the credentials, he couldn't have used them. And that is why the security lessons are clear, but the compliance lessons never get translated.
All right. You having fun so far with these stories? Okay. This one gets really wild, right? So we had a critical infrastructure target. These big facilities, a lot of you'll kind of guess the industry with the stock artwork here. A lot of times you have many construction crews coming and going and expanding the site. Figuring out who they are, what they're doing, when they show up, how they show up, learning the routines is often enough to get us in the fence line, and then maybe even more if people are used to seeing, oh, those guys must be from so-and-so. So how do we do this? We have a whole surveillance class. I'm not selling you training up here, but being out there, belly crawling through a field in camouflage, that's what we have to do sometimes, put eyes on target. We were very glad to be camouflaged. This is an actual photograph from this actual job that Drew took with his camera. But they literally, Drew and the team, they got all the way up to their VCP. They're monitoring the vehicle checkpoint. They're seeing, oh, hey, it looks like they're just kind of saying who they are, and they got a logo on their vet. Okay, and they're just getting waved in. Okay, and that's this crew who does this, and these guys are here Sunday, and she's always checking that. Okay, we kind of developed, all right, this is who we're going to say we are. We're coming in as technicians who are doing validation. So we understand you just had a crew coming last week. We're doing validation of their install, and we're going to go around and we're going to check your doors. And we've got our little framework and our tools, okay? So we got in the fence line, started walking around the buildings, and started servicing the doors. Literally, we were taking parts of the door off. We were just unscrewing things, trying to get noticed. This was late in the job. We'd been there all week at this point, and our contact in the SOC is like, man, you guys are really pushing it, and they're not catching you. He's looking at us. He's talking to his coworker. He's like, hey, can you pull up the camera from the west side of the building? Yeah, main screen that. What's going on over there? Do we have Sheridan working on the west side of the warehouse today? Are we doing doors? And like somebody's like shuffling papers. Like, I think that looks like them. Yeah, they were here. They've been working on the doors. Okay. And our point of contact is like, hey, man, I don't think they don't think anything's up. Can you go louder? Can you go bigger? So we started drilling doors. We just started drilling locks out of doors. This is live footage from the actual assessment. And people are there. People are walking by us, see us in our high vis and the hard hats, like, oh, those guys, yep, those Sheridan dudes, they're doing something or other. The reason we're doing this, we're actually drilling the lug off this lock, spinning it out, being able to flip the tailpiece. We then took the lock and then decoded it later. And we left the doors like this, just left a hole in it. Eventually, guards were like, hey, something's up. What's going on? And guards came to find us. And we're in some building and they go, hey, what are you guys doing? And my one colleague, he thought we were caught. He's like, all right, we got to show the authentication. And I was like, what does it look like we're doing? Which broke the guard's brain because he's like, well, it looks like you're working on doors, but you have badges and you're here with, don't you guys have access to this building? How did you have to do that? And we're like, oh yeah, but I mean, no one was here to let us in. He's like, well, just radio us next time because you got your guest badges, which we had printed ourselves. So he's like, okay, well, I don't know why. And he couldn't figure it out and he just left. He just left us alone. I'm like, oh my God. So there's a whole other story. It was on Dark Net Diaries. It involves a lot more alarms and me stealing a bike, just trying to get caught. But the guards didn't think it was right what was happening, but they didn't know how to validate exactly how we were wrong.
They didn't know how to validate what was going wrong because they were left to their own instincts, which says that when somebody in high vis is carrying power tools and is like, hey, what's going on, buddy? That's a person at work. And you're not going to bother somebody who's doing a job. Like you go bother somebody who looks like they're not working, right? That's the thing that you would normally do. So you heard the story told by a professional liar. Fuck, I married this guy. And now I want to know if you want to hear it from the perspective of somebody who is a checklist human, right? I'm a CISSP, right? Which is supposed to be this awesome credential. It's not, right? It's the thing that you fill out so that they let you through the doors, basically, in most cybersecurity jobs. And yet that's supposed to be the credential that lets you understand all of this. Let's go back to yet more compliance frameworks that could have stopped him in his tracks. My especial favorite one is monitoring of security controls. What the hell does that mean, right? It doesn't mean
super clear. It just says monitor the controls, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
They monitored my power drill.
Yeah, the guy who was there is like, oh, I'm definitely watching exactly what's happening right now. But the power to act and the understanding of the logic behind it was fully absent, right? And that is because you never really train people inside organizations, starting from the moment that it is a solopreneur all the way on up to the 80,000, 90. I don't even know how many people work at that company that we're talking.
A lot.
Oh, a lot. Right. There's never been that process of empowering individual people to say, hey, this looks weird. I know what to do when something doesn't look quite right. Right. So the question is, what do you do if you see something weird? Well, you check and find out if they were signed in by the security team and someone is escorting them while they're working. If they had a robust work order management system, and this, it sounds even more like a little bit of boilerplate, right? But literally just something that said, this person is authorized to be here and I can check it in the moment when I see them in a way that gives that person power and permission to enforce security controls, you couldn't have gotten in. If any of the guards could have validated badges in the field, they wouldn't have been able to get in. They wouldn't have baffled the guards the way that they did.
Yeah, they could have literally marched me over to the nearest badge reader and said, boop your badge, please. And been on the horn with the sock saying, yeah, door number 1740X, what badge did you just see pop up in Linnell Access or something? No one had trained them to do that. They just said, well, it looks like our badge. This story gets crazy, right? It actually is a story that involves some badge printers. We do like our badge printers. I do a whole bunch of talks about making fake credentials, and you can see me. I was going to be the elevator guy at one company. I've got my ThyssenKrupp hat. I've got my ThyssenKrupp shirt and my paperwork, but my badge doesn't match. Oh no, it's an Otis badge. So the night before, I call Bobak and I say, hey, if I send you a PNG image, can you shoot this out in your hotel room? I need to print a new badge. And we will often just bluff our way. I'm here from the elevator service. I'm here from Verizon, right? Bobak and I in our Verizon outfits. Of course they're Verizon. They belong in here. We're a big data company.
Let me also say, why do two people in a polo shirt work better than one person in a polo shirt?
Right. Two people, their polo shirts match. They obviously know what they're doing. I could see somebody, I'm a real suspicious, like, what's going on outside of my blinds? If there's someone in my backyard, it could be my neighbor. I'll be like, oh yeah, it's that guy. I don't know if I trust that guy. If it's two absolute strangers, but their shirts match, I'm like, well, he must be doing something, I guess.
Exactly. And he's telling the absolute truth. He is that person who's going to be 87 years old with a notepad, like peeking out of the blinds. And I'm going to be in the back with
sound
like
like
an iced tea
paranoid
with some
guy
shit
on
in it,
Nextdoor or something.
Yeah.
But we were inside this data center, right? Inside the data center. And one of the things we always look for, unlock workstations. I was able to find something that's, if you want to, you know how like people, you left your workstation unlocked and you change their background or something like that to their Windows display. Before you do, feel free to just check in their browser. Do you know that web browsers, you can't read the passwords, but you can see the list of sites? Screenshot that and make that their Windows background, right? There are a lot of very sensitive websites. Just click, yes, go ahead, save my password. Camera systems, document storage, social media, financial stuff. I didn't want to touch any of these. And I never want to really mess with the client. But I said, all right, I want to prove that I can do something. I flipped around. Amazon. Amazon.com is signed in. All right, I'll sign into Amazon. And I overnight purchased an SD card for myself. My plan was to actually, during the demonstrate stuff with my Flipper Zero and be like, hey, thanks for the SD card. I bought it. I had it shipped to this location and picked it up. So as I told them this, it actually didn't arrive in time for the meeting. I said, well, anyway, you'll go into your Amazon history just so you can cancel the order. The SD, I made a purchase, clean it up later. I don't even want to steal the $78 from you. And the client later on, we got a phone call. They said, hey, so you purchased stuff on Amazon that you shouldn't? I said, yeah. He said, did you purchase drugs? And I said, no, I mean, not on your card. What are you talking about? I don't know if you know this. They didn't know this. They learned there are a lot. Like if you walk into a pharmacy and say, hi, could I get cough syrup too many times? Somebody's making a phone call and you're going to get flagged, right? You got to show your ID. There are loads of vendors on Amazon that'll sell DXM in any quantity whatsoever. And they found orders for this in their Amazon history. And then they rolled it back and they found a lot of orders for this in their Amazon history. And they eventually figured out that an employee had been using the company Amazon to buy drugs. And it all was just because I did this stupid little buy an SD card. And like, are you freaking kidding me? And why are you saving passwords? Was this personal Amazon account? They said, no, it's the company one. I said, good Lord, use a password manager. And they thought, well, isn't saving it in the browser the same thing? I said, not if the browser's unlocked. So yeah, these were simple lessons, but they needed that impact to make it real to them.
And the number of times that you have discovered something that has happened that is real, that is drugs, that is misbehavior, that is criminal liability, the kinds of behaviors that we're supposed to be trying to catch is truly disturbing right at the moment. This is the mildest of the stories that I hear him tell. Some of the really good ones, you got to catch him for the afters, right? I hear there's a main event happening a little bit later on tonight across the street. I think we're probably going to be at that. And
we'll be there.
Yeah, we'll get a chance to tell you a couple of the really cool stories then. Here's the thing, though. This kind of story isn't just common, it's tragic, it's continuing, and it causes this sort of fire drill mentality that creates the kind of compliance policies that are an organization's response to trauma, okay? The way that we get bad compliance is people who flip out over a single thing like this and try to cover everything instead of understanding the system. So you hear this from a physical tester, right? And yet, it was actually the finance auditors that caught this problem. When they went back and took a look at the behavior of the organization, when they went back and took a look at the browser behavior and found this employee who had been using a previous employee's credentials to use that corporation's credit card.
For like a year.
For a year, with steadily increasing sizes in purchases, not one or two at a time, but the amount that you would use to restock the med kits in every one of the facilities, which is why it went unnoticed. It's the same principle as stealing 27 laptops. If the theft is big enough, right? If you owe the bank $1,000, you've got a problem. But if you owe the bank $1 million, they've got a problem, right? And when you make something big enough, it doesn't look like the kind of behavior you're familiar with anymore. And that is what an auditor is trained to do. Honestly, I had more fun doing this. I like to chase paper because I never feel qualified enough, okay? I never feel like I've got a giant chip on my shoulder. I like to, hunt down skin and mount on my wall the dead skins of certifications because there's no way to tell in my field whether or not we're qualified to do anything. There's nothing that says I'm a member in good standing of my profession. So I just keep trying to stack up a whole bunch of C's and A's and S's and stuff like that behind my name because I'm never sure when I'm going to learn something interesting. That was the most interesting certification I may ever have gotten. And I've got some cool shit from SANS and stuff. This one taught me how to go look for human behavior in weird places. This did not teach me how to look for weird behavior, right? And the reason why is it doesn't translate into human behavior. I can read this. I can look at, the CIS controls, right? We've all heard of these. We've got checklists. Everybody in this room who's got a highly configurable and orchestrated Excel spreadsheet that they've got to replicate again and again for every one of their clients, who in here has to do that checklist again and again and again, right? It is exhausting, and it's because we don't connect it to what's actually happening with human behavior. Here's what you got to ask people. Does your device lock when you don't use it? And get a real answer from them, right? You also have to enable people to tell you the truth with no consequences if they don't, in any way, shape, or form, if they haven't been acting in bad faith. They need to be free to not know the answer or to get it wrong as long as they're acting in good faith. Ask them this question and find out if it locks. And what you hope that they're going to say is, yeah, it's super annoying. It locks in 5 minutes. And then what you find out is that either they have disabled that or they can't disable that. If it's annoying enough, they'll try to have disabled it, right? So find out if they can disable it. It's better to hear them be a little bit annoyed and say, tell you what, it sounds like you've got a job where it locking every minute is causing you unnecessary grief. Let's see if we can make it lock every 10 minutes, right? There's an opportunity there for information security professionals and compliance pros to make this a little bit easier on people. And guess what? There is nothing in any compliance framework anywhere that says that there's a meaningful difference between 1 minute and 10 minutes on a screen lock. But in a case like this, where somebody got annoyed and they changed it to never, that's what enabled an organization like this to unknowingly purchase a ton of drugs and engage in a level of liability that I am still blown away by. So you got to ask people, can you sign into personal accounts? No, they're not allowed on work devices. They're not allowed or you can't, right? That question matters right there. And get a real answer. In smaller organizations, it's going to be not allowed. In larger organizations, hopefully it's not permitted, right? There's a bunch of tools that'll let you do that, but this is still the human question. If this organization had required screen locking, you couldn't have gotten into the computer. You wouldn't have been able to walk past the front door and simply look to find out that something was available for you to break into. If they'd expired sessions, right? And required mandatory log back ins again every 30 days, something like that. It wouldn't for a year, right? And if they'd configured company-wide session locking, you couldn't have done it again and again and again and again and again.
So we've had a lot of horror stories. We're going to give you one cool one. I think it's a cool one. It doesn't make me sound cool. It involves me getting caught, but I love the ending of this, right? So we're in Nebraska. We have a food production company. They are making things that wind up on your grocery store shelves. There's a lot of tight controls in that being involved. You can't have strangers walking in there. Did you know, by the way, that there are things like if you buy Band-Aids or something, you can buy Band-Aids with metal in them. Do you know why that is? I love learning about other industries. It's because food product going out on the assembly line, they go through metal detectors. If anything falls off, a glove or something like that, they'll have metal that'll get detected. It doesn't wind up in your kid's cereal. I thought that was neat. I'm telling you, cocktail party humor. So we'd done a lot of research. We learned about this kind of stuff. The guys were like, hey, if you walk in there, you have to have this coat, not that. For this, we're learning about agribusiness and food safety regs. So we got our cover stories. We made some IDs. We were going to implant some sniffers on their badge readers. We had this all set in our heads, and then we actually get out to the site. This was a small town locale. It was right on Main Street in a town of like under 2,000 people. And we're looking like, oh man, okay. This is either going to be really easy or really hard. We're saying, okay, most of us thought this would be a piece of cake, though. Like, look, it's a sleepy little town. We'll hit it on the weekend. Saturday night, they got the weekend sports games. We're going to go out, walk all around the campus. We'll install those sniffers behind the badge readers. Then we'll break in on Sunday morning. Everyone's either watching football or they're at church or something like that. We got this. This is what's going to happen. And we were wrong. We got there on Sunday morning. Parking lot basically super dead. Okay, let's go ahead, drive by, park around the corner. Just kind of get the lay of the land. All right, we go in and we walk into like a local coffee shop. We're doing like casing on the street, and let's dip in here. And then we realize like how small a town this was, where our teammate Rob, he's there buying a muffin, and like everyone coming in, it's, hey, Susie, Frankie, Tommy, how you doing, James? Like, man, everybody knows everyone in this. And Rob is like, I feel like I stick out. I got to get out of here. So he comes back to the car. Yeah.
I heard a couple people, and I think it might even have been like in the MSP Geek Slack, right? Say like, I can both hear and smell this photo, right? Like I can hear and smell it. I know exactly what's happening here. This is the exact place you think it is.
Yeah. So we said, no, come on, you're freaking out. They're doing their thing. They're like people just having their Sunday morning breakfast. This place is dead. It's super empty. We've captured our data from those credential readers that were sniffing badges. We're gonna get in. We can encode our badges. Our badges will boop on the doors. Let's start going around. We're walking around the buildings and grounds, checking out the food production equipment, the storage areas. We're probing some little access hatches. We could get into the mechanical spaces. We found a side door that we could get into. Okay. We found a little key organizer box. We're getting some wins. Stole a key, get a useful key into a very sensitive spot. And we're inside one building. We're like, all right, we're feeling pretty good. We've been here for like 45 minutes. We're taking some cool photos. This is all right. We're going to be able to march around, document everything, put our feet up, go to the IHOP or something, get pancakes, buy lunch. And as we're formulating the rest of our plan for this very large facility, one of our team is like, hey, there's a car pulling in here. That's weird. Why is somebody pulling in? Okay, we'll look through the windows. There's an employee who walks out of his car, and he starts walking up to a building. We're like, okay, he must be working up. Then we see the same employee a few minutes later walk across the parking lot to another building. We're like, what is this guy doing? Then he starts coming to the building we're in. We're like, oh, shit. But, we looked the part. We had we had stolen clothes from this agribusiness. We had everything. We had ourselves together, right? And this guy kept proceeding around until he finds us. My teammate and I, he's like, hey, wouldn't call it confrontational, but definitely suspicious. He's like, excuse me, you guys don't work here. Can I ask what you're doing? And again, we had our whole, we said, no, we're here from the Wyoming office. They sent us in on a weekend project. We're validating the bit up. We didn't get through half a sentence. He's like, you didn't come from Wyoming. Keith would have called me if you were coming from Wyoming. Dropping other names. Like, no, Keith didn't do it. Susan from HR, she knows about it. He's like, really? And he's pulling out his phone and calling Susan from HR saying, no, on a Sunday morning, right? Eventually, we could not get anywhere with this guy. We had to show him an authorization letter saying, no, look, this is a test. We're actually supposed to be here. This is a guy. We're like, what are you doing here? Do you work here on Sunday morning? He's like, no, I was driving by and I saw a truck I didn't recognize in the parking lot. And then I saw one of you walk through the parking lot and boop that door to get, and I was like, you saw a badge work? And he's like, yeah, I didn't know who you were. So that level of buy-in, so much so that even the next day on Monday, we came around to do cleanup and we're pulling the ESP keys and we had a meeting scheduled with the owner. And then we're getting stopped by employees who kept saying, you don't work here. And we have legit visitor badges this time. And everyone at this place was like, I know everyone here. You're not one of the people here. What are you doing? This was a small scene. They had long-term relationships with these employees, some of whom had worked there for 30, 40 years, and they'd invested in their people. You can't fake that real meaningful connection that the employees had, and they cared about their environment. That was the most unbeatable security I'd ever faced in my life.
It absolutely is. And now this is how he tells the story. And I'm going to tell it from my perspective, which is going to sound an awful lot the same. There's a bunch of controls that are relevant and related to the work of finding and detecting somebody who is running roughshod through your organization, right? Bunch of security awareness training. Please feel free to stop here and groan if you would like to, because there's a bunch of it that's out there. Bunch of it that's really good. Use Rachel Toback's Social Proof if you don't know what else to use. It's an absolutely wonderful organization. So absolutely go for that one. These are the kinds of controls that can provide that kind of security awareness for an organization, right? Yet more. They're all over the place. The CIS controls section 14 and 8. This is version 1, I think, of 8 right at the moment, level 1. It is, it's implementation group 1, section 14. And the subparts of it relate to the kinds of controls that could train an employee to find somebody like him running around.
I love that you know that.
I love that you love that I know that.
And it's a shame that most people don't know that.
So here's the thing, right? If there's something going on, do you know who to call? Do you know what to do? I'm unsure that guy did, right? But here's the thing. Have that incident response policy. Have it ready to go. Security awareness training that's been done. Does anybody at your organization know what a social attack looks like? Whether that's coming from inside the building, it's coming from a phishing email. What does it look like? How do you identify the act of being socially engineered? Hopefully, there's some kind of regular training on it, right? But here's the deal. There is no control in that list I gave you that could have made it so that he could have been stopped. Only that employee who cared that much, who came in on a Sunday, who noticed something out of place, who did outside what his job was, stopped him that day. All right? There is no replacement for that kind of care. It is not compliance that stops somebody like him. It's care, it's culture, it's empowerment, and it's understanding that you're doing the right thing even when you don't know and you're finding out. That makes my heart swell as an auditor. I love that fact that there was that joy and care in that moment. We've got to start asking people questions that hit them where they live, that empower them, and that use simple language to do it. Last week, I was sitting in a panel. It was on the record. It was public. And I was sitting there with two people, Phil Venables, who's the CISO of Google Cloud, and Rob Lee, who's the CEO of Dragos, which is an ICS and SCADA company. And I was there kind of repping the small business compliance. Like, you should be frightened that I'm the one sitting there repping small business and compliance and MSPs, right? We're trying to have more conversations with people about this. But I remember sitting there as somebody in the crowd said, hey, if we're having this big of trouble getting small businesses into the supply chain, if they can't manage to comply with CMMC, the framework that lets people get into the DoD's supply chain, then maybe what we should do is we should invent a new and better compliance framework for small businesses to adhere to. I picked up my coffee and I got ready in that moment. I was going to chuck it across the room at him, because the problem we keep having here is that people don't translate what we've got into usable, meaningful, deeply human questions that can help people genuinely navigate these kinds of frameworks and empower them. We've got to start asking questions that are meaningful. Like, if you get contacted about a technical support issue, how do you know it's Microsoft calling you, right? Do you know if there are any active email accounts for former employees? What about when somebody tries to come in and do some maintenance at your workspace? They say they're going to bid on a new job for you, right? That question, locking devices, finding out whether or not there's a technical problem or a security incident at your organization, we need to start asking these questions in simple language. I told them last week at this forum that I was speaking at, as people kept throwing compliance questions at me, and I was like, bring them on, bring them. I said, there's a simple question that solves about 80% of the security issues that I see in every small business, and you are never going to find it on any compliance framework ever. Ask every single person in a small business and inside an MSP, is your home and work email password different? That doesn't appear anywhere on any compliance framework, and it solves a staggering amount, not just a majority, but a staggering amount, 80% maybe, of the security problems I see at this point. And we have got to start asking those questions of people in a way that connects these stories to their lives in a meaningful way. Compliance, as we say, is how organizations cope with trauma. There's great stories in a bunch of different incident playbooks, and any of you who've ever worked at large organizations have probably seen some pretty interesting regulations and rules, like corporate executives aren't allowed to take any hired employees on boats with more than 7 containers of Bacardi rum, right? And you're just like, 6 okay then? Right? And there is a hell of a story behind that entry getting put in the risk register, right? And yet that's how we deal with trauma in large organizations. And in small organizations, put up or shut up. I got a little upset at Phil's a friend, a colleague, and I was like, Phil, people at organizations that are huge are pushing these regulations upstream and expecting tiny organizations to be able to comply with enterprise-grade security controls that they don't understand and nobody's phrasing appropriately for them. The only thing that I've seen work is caring and building a culture where people are free to say they don't know and to check up in that moment. That's the only thing out of every single one of these stories that stopped him. That's it. That comes from respecting people and meeting them where they are and understanding that they've got a different job than we do. I am death on people that use the phrase stupid user tricks. There's a lot of people that we serve in our organizations, MSPs and VCSOs, who have clients who are truckers and accountants and business owners. They make tires, they make America, and they have a different skill set than we do. And I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to be a lawyer, right? Marv Dad tried on that one. He was like, you don't want to work in an MSP for the rest of your life. I want you to go to school. I mean, it sort of took. And what I've ended up now is realizing that I keep coming back around again to the things I learned from my family, from my dads, how to iterate for better from my poker playing dad. And that working in an MSP is some hard fucking work from Marv Dad. And that learning that respect for people and phrasing the questions that we ask them in a way that meets them where they live, that's the respect that I hope that we get to show every single day. It's the only thing that stops somebody like you, right? I'm a guest in this house, and I deeply appreciate Jason and Matt and everybody here who has let us come and have this conversation. I'm a guest in this house. He's already a guest in your house. And I wanted to let you folks...
I'll put the beer back later.
And I wanted to let you folks know, we've had such a wonderful time here, and I want to ask if you want to follow up at the end too. Also want to say if anybody wants to ask any questions, that's great. But I made chili sugar if you like to rim cocktail glasses or throw it on fruit. And I've got quite enough here, I think, for everybody in the room. If you want to come up after we're all done here, we'll step out into the hallway. But if you want to follow up any last thoughts you got here?
Yeah, I love approaching audiences that don't usually get to see me. And some of you were very kind. Some of you came up and said, hey, before the talk started. So my name has percolated out. But how many people get to see this side of my industry ever? And was it valuable? Did you mind listening to my silly butt up here? All right. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having us very, very much.
Thank you, everybody. Absolutely.